Joining me now is Alan Hibbard. He's a precious metals and alternative money specialist at GoldSilver.com. Alan, great to have you on the show. Just as we've seen some profit taking after what's been a very strong year for the major indexes, in fact, their best year since 2021, we have seen the price of cryptocurrency fall back a little bit. Regardless, do you think Fed Chair Powell's assessment that Bitcoin is like gold is true?
Yeah, absolutely. So it has been a great year for the S&P, but even slightly better year for gold and obviously a significantly better year for Bitcoin. But yeah, in this case, I do actually agree with Powell. Bitcoin is more of a competitor to gold, and it's not so much a competitor to the dollar. What a lot of people forget is that money and currency are two completely different use cases. They're very different. They're different problems you're solving for, and they require different solutions. So if you want to store your value over a long period of time, you want something like gold or Bitcoin. That necessarily makes them heavy and slow. So they're not going to be used in day-to-day purchases like buying a cup of coffee. On the other hand, if you want something that's optimized for high throughput and high speed with low friction, you want a currency like the dollar or any of the other 200 sovereign currencies. And that, of course, is not going to be a good store of value over the long run. So these are two different use cases. I think Bitcoin and gold both fall into the camp of a long-term store of value. And obviously, they have differences like physical and digital and so forth, which we could go into.
What is your outlook for cryptocurrency, Alan, in the new year?
Well, mostly I focus on Bitcoin. I used to focus on other cryptos as well until I realized that almost all of them are currencies, like I mentioned, like the dollar, and the exception is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is more akin to gold. It's a long-term store of value, whereas every other cryptocurrency is more like a sovereign fiat currency, or it's like airline miles or reward points, like you might have Kohl's Cash, right? They all fall into the same category of being a currency that's controlled by a central entity that maybe has a use case, but maybe doesn't. And so I'm not too interested in focusing on all those different currencies and their individual idiosyncrasies. I focus more on Bitcoin, and it is going to be a huge year for Bitcoin. 2025 is going to be explosive.
Interesting. Now, in terms of precious metals, do you have the same forecast for that group as well?
Yes, I do. I focus on Bitcoin, gold, and silver primarily because they are three forms of money. And silver did about the same as the S&P, gold slightly better, and Bitcoin the best of all three. And I expect 2025 to look very similar. So I think it'll be a very strong year for gold and silver, and even bigger year for Bitcoin.
How does the incoming Trump administration and a red sweep in Washington impact your outlook?
Well, this might be controversial, but on the long arc of things, I think it's just noise, and I think it's kind of indifferent. I know that's really controversial in the Bitcoin community, but what's going to happen with Bitcoin is inevitable. It's just like if Trump had had two terms back to back, something would have happened. If we had someone in between like Biden, something would have happened. If it wasn't Trump, something would have happened. But eventually, Bitcoin is going to be adopted by the United States government. It's going to be adopted by every government around the world. It's just a matter of time. And if it happens in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 16, it doesn't really matter. The world is moving in one direction. It's the best money the world has ever seen, and capital is going to flow that direction, whether it happens quickly or slowly. It's only a matter of time before everyone realizes it. So the sooner you educate yourself on what money really is and why Bitcoin is so good, the sooner you can position yourself to take advantage of that.
Alan, here's what I want to hear from you on as we talk so much about it from an investment or a trading perspective. How are people going to be using this in their real life?
Yeah, a long-term store of value. So it's ironically unsexy to hold Bitcoin, just like it's unsexy to hold gold. You sort of buy it and you forget about it, and that's how you use it. The use case is holding it, unlike a currency where the use case is spending it. So the use case of a currency is for it to move, and people often brag about how fast their currency is and how low the fees are. That's the use case, but holding on to a currency does you absolutely nothing. You don't want to hold a currency for the long term. However, gold and Bitcoin, the use case is literally holding it. And when you're done using it, you give it to someone else and they use it to hold it for the long term. So we're not going to use Bitcoin in our daily lives. We're going to hold it and forget about it, and that's using it.
Alan Hibbard, thank you so much for joining. Alan is a precious metals and alternative money specialist at GoldSilver.com.